right, I think we'll get started. If I could have everyone's attention.
Yeah.
Thank you all for being here. My name is Scott Ingmeyer, I work for the Madison County Planning Department. And there are about 8 of us that have spent the entire day in this room right here. So we've been working feverishly with EPA and our consultants, and so far today the City of Oneida. But just to give you a little bit of a background on why we're here, you may remember that probably almost exactly a year ago, Mr. Paul Byer was here giving a presentation to the city and city officials. He's back again. He joined us for this afternoon today from the New York State Department of State. What we tried to do back in 2010, this has kind of got this process kicked off for us. The county health department had done a health improvement plan for Madison County, and we were trying to bring some topics forward to our local planning and zoning officials to start thinking about smart growth, which is a concept that has gained a lot of traction over the years, and something that we've been trying to both educate ourselves on and educate our community members on. So had a meeting, and we had presentations, and we wanted to take some of that and follow it up with action. So there were, one of the things about smart growth is that a lot of the tools that are out there are for urban communities, and as you know, much of Madison County doesn't fit the urban criteria. So we've struggled a bit in trying to implement some of these ideas and make them applicable to the situations that you all are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So from there we moved, we were working closely with the City of Oneida. I wanted to point out that there's a couple of handouts that EPA, it looks like they've all been taken already, which is great. So EPA had made us aware of these 2 handouts. At the time, this Putting Smart Growth to Work in Rural Communities handout was given to us. And since then, now there's essential smart growth fixes for rural planning and zoning. And we had actually taken this smart growth presentation or pamphlet and put together, Jamie Hart from our office worked and made one of these just for Madison County. So we wanted to kind of bring these concepts down to our local level. Unfortunately, we just have this one copy here. We distributed many of these back when it was published in 2011. Yeah. So it's on our website now. You can find it. But we've really been trying to now take it to the next level. And we worked with EPA. We put together a smart growth implementation assistance request for proposals, where we asked for assistance basically in implementing some of these smart growth tools. And so that's what's brought us to where we are today. There's a bunch of, we've been meeting with EPA and their consultants. Essentially the way this project works is that the county doesn't get the funding. EPA puts together a program for us and hires a consultant on our behalf to work on this project. And so we're at the implementation phase of that now. We've kind of been having conference calls for a while. And what we've asked them to do is put together a toolkit that allows each of our municipalities to go through their comprehensive plan, their zoning codes, their ordinances, and come up with solutions toward implementing smart growth that fit the rural nature of the communities that we all live in here. And so that's really where we are. We spent the day today with the City of Oneida working through these tools. We're sort of beta testing them to see how they work. These tools not only will be developed for Madison County communities, but EPA hopes that they're applicable to communities beyond our borders nationwide. And so we're excited about that opportunity, and looking forward to working tomorrow with the Village of Chittenango, and then later in the day, the town of Brookfield. And so we wanted to get the full gamut of municipalities in the county to try to test these tools with. So we're working through that now. This is about an 18-month-long project, and I think we're just about a year into it. So we'll take what we learned from working through this tool these couple days, and consultants will take it back and work through it. We'll work through it with them, and then ultimately we'll be using this locally here in Madison County and making it available hopefully to all other communities. So just a little bit of background on how we got here. The meeting tonight is intended to be educational. We've got about an hour presentation from our consultants to look at the concept of smart growth and some related activities. And so rather than just focus on the city of Oneida, we opened it up to everyone. And so just a little bit of housekeeping. If you're here tonight, you're interested in getting the hours credit for the meeting for your planning and zoning training requirements. If you haven't picked up your, we printed out a bunch of training slips over there. I don't really need to sign them, but I can sign them for you before you leave if you want to make sure they're official. And just want to make sure you leave with that credit. So that being said, a little bit of housekeeping. I'd just like to invite Sarah Dale up from the US EPA in Washington, D.C. to give a little bit of perspective from EPA and introduce our consultants.
So I'm just going to stand here. So I'm Sarah Dale. I'm with the EPA's Office of Sustainable Communities in D.C. And I have two colleagues here, Megan McConville, who's also from our office in D.C., and Sabina Pense, who's from our office in New York, our Region 2 office. So she's our local on-the-ground EPA contact. And I will let our consulting team introduce themselves when it's their turn. But our office at EPA helps define smart growth solutions to how communities grow and develop. So it's not the typical EPA work, but a lot of the ways that communities can have positive impacts on air quality, water quality, health, well-being of community members is through growth and development patterns. And we're here to help Madison County through the process that was just described, figure out ways to change their codes and policies and adapt them towards a smart growth future. So this project is part of a much larger project that our office does. It's called the Smart Growth Implementation Assistance, and Madison County is one of 5 communities that was selected this year out of, I think, over 40. So it's a pretty competitive program that we have. So this is, and again, as was very eloquently explained, we're going to be creating a tool that rural communities can use to help audit their own codes and plans, but we hope that we can bring it to a much larger national audience. So we are going to take this work and move it out into the country, which is really, really exciting for all of us. So we have a long presentation ahead of us that will explain a lot more about this. So why don't I hand this over to Alan?
Thank you. I'll just introduce myself briefly. I'm Alan Steinbeck. I'm a project manager with Renaissance Planning Group, and we are those contractors that are working on behalf of EPA and you all here in Madison County. I am work out of our recently opened Durham office in North Carolina, and I'm a native of Georgia. I grew up in Atlanta, which is a poster child for dumb growth. So I learned all about that growing up. I got my education there as a planner and architect. And also spent a lot of time down in Florida, which is a great model for how to promote smart growth and manage growth. Both of those are very high, fast-growing places, obviously. Madison County is a little different in terms of its growth rate, but a lot of the same concepts and benefits and efficiencies that you can gain from smart growth apply here for sure. And so we are here trying to talk about how to do that in a comprehensive way, not just from a regulatory standpoint, but how to do that through the planning process and what types of documents are needed, but also through the ways communities interact with each other and implement programs that support community development and economic health. So it's a very comprehensive view we're taking of this, but we do have the focus of the audit tool on a number of topics that we'll talk about in the presentation. It's not an hour-long presentation. We will probably take about 40 minutes because we do want to respect the time advertised to go from that 5:30 to 6:30. So we do want to try to close, and we'll reserve a little bit of time for question and answer at the end. So.
Hey everybody, I'm Mike Callahan. I'm also with Renaissance Planning Group, and I'll be giving a portion of the presentation. I'm out of the Charlottesville, Virginia office. However, I know Madison County well. I spent a good portion of my life in Kingston, New York, and then in Binghamton, New York. And so I've been through Madison County a number of times, and it's really great to be back here and working with the county and the communities. So I'm going to turn it over to Alan.
Okay, so we're going to try to dim the lights up front here so y'all can see the screen better. That's great. Thanks. We have several sections here. I think I'll be able to project better if I sit down and see the notes here, so I'm going to do that. Just to give you an overview of what we're doing, Scott mentioned it in general. We do have several goals that we're trying to accomplish through this technical assistance. One is to support this community and those parts of Madison County that are interested in implementing smart growth policies. We want to create examples through working directly with towns and villages and cities that can be applied countywide, and identify those common barriers and opportunities for how to get this work done. The purpose of the audit tool is to help rural communities assess the level of support for smart growth in their plans and policies, and identify potential changes that can support their economic, environmental, health, and physical well-being. So it is a holistic strategy that we're employing, and with an emphasis on areas that go beyond just physical development. We do have the 2 previous studies that were alluded to. I have an extra copy up here if anyone did not get a copy, and we'll see how many we can round up for those of you who want these 2 publications that were referred to earlier tonight. We are applying this tool in 3 half-day workshops. We did spend this morning here in Oneida talking about the city of Oneida. Tomorrow we're going to visit the village of Chittenango and the town of Brookfield to review their policies. The focus is going to be on codes, design standards, and plans in these cases. We have 11 goal areas that we're talking about, and we're going to really point out those areas of emphasis that in general need help within the community, but also specific strategies that we can employ to upgrade documents. The 11 goal areas include engage and connect community members, improve health and promote active living, increase energy efficiency and provide renewable energy, invest in efficient public infrastructure systems and operations, meet housing needs for a range of ages and incomes, preserve historical and cultural resources, protect natural habitats and ecosystems, provide transportation choices, revitalize village and town centers, strengthen the local and regional economies, and support productive agriculture for a variety of markets. So this is pretty much the whole sandwich of what the topics that you would need to address in this area. These are goal areas that were developed by the local team here in Madison County, so they were specifically identified to help address those 11 primary issue and topic areas that are important to this area. The types of things that we're auditing include zoning ordinances, subdivision ordinances, land development codes, engineering standards, design standards, and building and energy code information. On the planning side, comprehensive plans are being assessed. Also relevant for this kind of tool are economic development plans or strategic plans, system plans, special area plans such as downtown plans, sustainability plans, or other types of design, anything with a design public outreach element. We did sit down and try to think about what are the typical issues that rural communities face. And as I go around the country to different areas and different regions, we do a lot of work with small towns and rural communities. There's very much a common theme across the country now in terms of what's going on in the economic climate, what's happened after a result of several decades of growth and change. And so a lot of people are facing a loss of resource-dependent and manufacturing jobs. There's slow growth, population loss, and aging population in our rural communities. There's often rapid and unplanned growth in communities near universities or urban centers. There across the board are physical challenges to maintaining or improving infrastructure and amenities and providing public services. This is not just a problem of New York State. I recognize it's a big problem for towns and villages to cover their operating budgets. And there's a lot of discussion about how to make that work, but it is a problem across the country, and it's not just a rural problem. Urban areas are having very difficult times in covering their local public operations. And lastly, public health challenges, including high rates of obesity and other health issues that we're facing as a country. With specifically focused on Madison County, some of the issues that are here are steady growth throughout time, although most of that has occurred outside of villages in the town areas. There's a major decline in farmland over the past 60 years. although that trend has recently stabilized. There's an aging population across the board, but especially among farmers. There are high rates of obesity, heart disease, asthma, and there are definitely fragmented planning responsibilities among county, town, village, and state. And there's a unique set of circumstances here in the state of New York that we're trying to address here. So just to define smart growth in the rural context, Scott mentioned that a lot of people see smart growth as an urban issue or a suburban issue, and we challenged ourselves to identify what it means for rural areas and how we're developing these recommendations. Key to that is supporting the rural landscape to help existing places thrive and to revitalize centers. And then when new places are created, make sure that they're great places and they fit in with the community's context and are planned and developed efficiently. Several key themes here are smart growth supports and strengthens traditional resource-based economy. This includes the resources that come off the land in a productive way, also natural resources. Smart growth makes use of land preservation strategies to support working lands and strengthen community centers. I have some examples of that I'll talk about shortly. It prioritizes public investment in existing community centers in terms of public infrastructure, streets, water, sewer, etc. It encouraged private development and employer relocation in existing centers so that we want to make sure that change is regulated, but that regulations do not destroy the possibility for change in centers. And there's a different way to approach regulation in town and village centers than there is out in undeveloped areas. Smart growth supports development of new compact mixed-use walkable places. This is a place in my hometown that is a newer development with vertically integrated residential above retail spots, and it's a very popular place for people to go. People go there as a destination from around the town. Smart growth improves accessibility by connecting people to destinations, offering multiple ways to get around. And it's not just a mobility issue of choice for people to walk and bike, but it's also a recreational and a quality of life issue for people to get exercise, to get from place to place. Greenways and trails planning is a very important part of rural planning, and it's a great way to create amenities for people in a low-cost way and to provide multiple benefits. So I'm going to hand it over to Mike, who's going to tell you more about the case studies that we did in this effort.
I'm going to stand up. Until now, and I might not. I've been drinking a lot of coffee and sitting in this room all day, so I'm going to stand. As part of the project, we studied 2 communities. We were hoping to learn a few lessons that may be applicable in Madison County from our Dryden, New York case study. Dryden's down the road, down Route 13 towards Ithaca. And we also, this is a little more applicable maybe when the tool goes national, although I think there are some lessons to be learned for here too. But we also studied Cheyenne, Wyoming, which is way out in rural southeastern Wyoming. So I'll start with Dryden. It's a little difficult to see, but that is a map of the town. I think it's around 30 miles or so southwest. I did Google driving directions. It's about 15,000 people, a town. It has 2 villages, Freeville and Dryden, and it has a couple of hamlets as well. I think there's several issues in Dryden that are unique, maybe that aren't as applicable here, but there's also several issues that do apply in Madison County. They've had fairly just kind of steady growth, not super fast growth, but fairly steady growth. It's also been outside of the villages, so I can't remember the exact stat, but it's something like the percentage of the population that's in the villages dropped from 24 to 17% over the last 20 years. So as you see on this map, these red dots are development, residential development in the, I believe that's in the 90s. And you can see a lot of it, and into the early 2000s, you can see a lot of it is kind of just scattershot around the town. This has implications on farmland. It's a big agricultural community. The northeastern part of Dryden especially has a lot of dairy and other agricultural operations. It's the biggest organic dairy in the Northeast, I believe we heard today. So they also have a lot of valuable open space, a lot of recreational waterways and just trails and things like this. So there's a desire on the part of the elected officials in the community to preserve some of those features. Housing is a big issue there as well. This may be a little bit unique compared to Madison County or parts of Madison County, but they have a lot of high-end and a lot of more inexpensive housing. So they have housing that's catering a little bit to employees of Cornell to the west and SUNY Cortland to the east and Ithaca College to the west. And they also have over 1,100 mobile homes. So just a very wide disparity in the housing, but there's not a lot of kind of that mid-price housing, townhomes or smaller single-family homes that are affordable to kind of average income. And also natural gas drilling is a kind of a hot button issue there as well. So we had them here earlier, actually, sitting right here about an hour ago. I wish they were still here because they could talk to this better than me. But they've done a lot to address these issues. They decided, I guess starting about 8 years ago, they were going to kind of take the smart growth approach to what was happening in the community, in the town. So first thing they did is develop a comp plan back in 2005. Then the current planning staff came on board. They actually have 2 planning staff, and decided they wanted to implement some of these ideas that were expressed in the comp plan and that the officials had. And they decided, rather than just jumping right into drafting regulations, land use regulations in the form of zoning or subdivision ordinances, that they were going to bring everybody together and talk about what people wanted the community to look like, actually physically. And so they drafted design guidelines. They created both residential and commercial design guidelines. And those guide the development of land for commercial and residential use. So that was in 2008. And earlier they were telling us that they had somebody come in, I think it was to develop an Extra Mart or a gas station. And they just handed the developer the guidelines. The developer went out and built something that followed the guidelines. And they weren't mandatory, but this developer chose to follow them. So they're very powerful. The community really supported them. They moved on in 2012, so they actually just got zoning, updated their zoning law in 2012. This was a little bit more of a challenge, but I think they did some pretty interesting things. For one, they didn't have accessory dwelling units, so like a small property, a small house, maybe your apartment that's connected with a single-family home. That was not allowed. Townhomes were not allowed under the old zoning. And so, as the planning director put it, there were a lot of things that are happening in the market these days that the zoning, which was 30, 40 years old, just didn't allow. So they really modernized the zoning. I think they did some neat things too around the villages. So as I was saying, a lot of the development is kind of scattershot, and they wanted to kind of focus it around the villages to the best that they could. And so they created a traditional neighborhood district around the 2 villages. You can kind of see it in orange next to the village of Dryden. And what that does is it kind of extends the design, the kind of street system and grid and all that, and features that you see in the village to the development that happens on the periphery. So I thought that was kind of interesting as well. They talked a lot today about how they had a small area on the western, I guess there's a big eastern-western divide within the town, and they don't necessarily see eye to eye, but on the western side, actually very close to Cornell University, bordering Ithaca, they had a small hamlet where there was a lot of development pressure because of the proximity to the university. But there was a lot of kind of skepticism about the zoning, and people didn't want to see zoning regulations, and just a lot of concern about change in the area and what might happen if development were to occur. So they actually, in their zoning law, created a hamlet district and put it there over Varna, that's the name of the hamlet, and said we'll come back in a year or after this zoning law is approved, and we will kind of hammer out the guidelines, the zoning for the hamlet through a really kind of intensive process with the residents of that area. I think it was only a couple hundred people that live in that area. But it was a really, I wish they talked about it for about an hour, because I can't really boil it down into a minute here. But I think the thing I took away was that, you know, even though there was a lot of concern there about the zoning and all, the people kind of had a common idea of what they wanted it to look like. You know, they saw other hamlets and villages and what they look like, and people had really kind of a common vision. It was just a matter of kind of getting everyone together to talk it out and actually use some different facilitation techniques with mapping and stuff that the planning staff did. But you know, they couldn't necessarily articulate it in words, but when they all got together and worked it out, they were able to create a good vision for that hamlet and design guidelines that they really support. So moving on to the next slide. Now, these are just some lessons learned from Dryden. The first one is that starting with design guidelines was critical. That's what I've just been saying. People really were supportive of talking about, thinking about what the community would look like, not necessarily the nuts and bolts of zoning regulations, but what things would look like. And also, the last point there I think is important as well. And we'll see this with the next case study, but they really emphasize in their documents or planning documents using, you know, kind of simple strategies that work, not getting overly complicated. One thing the planning director told me was that they considered a transfer development rights program, but it was just it's too small of a community and too complicated, really, so they went with a purchase a development rights program to preserve farmland. But the simpler the better, is what their planning director said. And also, they really use kind of plain language and graphics in their documents, which makes them very easy to understand. And you can just see what they're looking to do when you look through the documents pretty quickly. So I'll talk quickly about Cheyenne, because I know it's not quite as relevant or nearby, for sure, as Dryden. This is a very rural community, but it is a city, and it's a somewhat large city. It's about 50,000 people, but it is very much isolated. There's not a whole lot surrounding it. There's cattle land. A couple hours south, almost 3 hours south, is Denver, so that's kind of the nearest region. And a couple of the issues there, one, they didn't have a very diverse economy. They're really dependent on government jobs, state and federal. And they also were losing younger people who weren't returning to the community. And we've heard this in a lot of smaller rural communities that we've talked to, is that younger people leave, they go to a bigger city or they go to college, and then they don't come back. And there's an interest in you know, bringing people back. So they wanted to take smart growth approaches to kind of revitalize their downtown, make it more vibrant, make it more walkable, in hopes that jobs and people, particularly their younger people, would want to come back. And then finally, they also had a lot of, well, I'll get into that in just a second, actually.
Next slide.
Yeah. So they decided, in response to their need to kind of diversify their economy, to make their downtown more vibrant, to retain their younger people, that they were going to engage in a planning process and think about where they wanted to focus development, how they wanted to change their various land regulations, land development regulations. And so they started out with a comprehensive plan in 2006, which was a really successful effort. There's a lot of support for it. And they moved on and they decided that was actually a joint county-city plan. It's probably something that's a little more difficult to do in upstate New York, but there it makes sense with their the way their counties and cities are set up. But they decided they wanted to move on from there to implement it by creating a unified development code. So they had zoning over here, and they had subdivision regulations over here, and they had design guidelines over here, and street standards over here. And they were all kind of developed at different points in time and under different policies, different administrations, and they just weren't consistent. They were difficult to work with. The development community did not like working with these codes and regulations. So they decided to unify them all into one document called the Unified Development Code. And this started in 2006. They actually had initially decided they were going to kind of piecemeal update their codes, and they tried to update one particular section dealing with large retail, like big box retail, but it took so long and it was such a hassle, they decided we just need to probably do this all at once, one big effort. I think the story here, and this is applicable to almost any community, is that they had an advisory committee helping. This is the planning board for the city of Cheyenne. They had an advisory committee helping them develop the Unified Development Code, but I don't know that the representation of it really reflected all of the opinions in the community. And so they were going through the process, developing this thing, and they kind of were getting near the end, and all of a sudden, out of the blue at a planning commission meeting, they tried to kill it, planning commission. I guess some people had talked to some members of the planning commission. Someone introduced a motion to just kill the whole project after 4 years. It was nearing the end. So fortunately, the planning commission said, time out. Let's do something different. They pulled together what they call the Critical Path Committee, and they really brought in everyone from, the person that wanted no regulation whatsoever of land development to environmentalists. There was a big, broad cross-section of the population, and they met 20 times over a year, and they were able to hammer out a lot of the issues they had. I guess there was some provisions related to open space and street design that development community was concerned was going to raise the cost of development. So they were able to reach some compromises on those issues, and it's funny because in the end, the planning director there told me we got a better product, and it had broad support. And one of the things that happened was when they brought in everyone, including people opposed to what they were doing with the Unified Development Code, those folks realized that this is actually a better product. It was a better process, that the new UDC kind of streamlined and clarified a lot of things that were confusing about the old regulations. And so they were able to move forward and got consensus on it. And they're already seeing a lot better proposals come through. They've told me this only happened about 6 months ago that they approved the Unified Development Code. But anyhow, I think it's a good story about the importance of getting everybody involved. And another slide. A couple other things. So I talked about the process, and you might be wondering what exactly was in the Unified Development Code, because in addition to the process being interesting, I think it's a really good example of a development code, a zoning code, and a subdivision regulation. First of all, they were wanting to support infill development in Cheyenne, so they had seen a lot of development on the periphery and out in the county and on agricultural land. And as I started out describing this case study, they want to add vibrancy to their city, to the interior, to the core of the city. And they were having trouble with infill development. People would come in, want to build on a site in the city, and the parking regulations, you have to have a certain number of parking spaces per bedroom or per square foot, just made it prohibitive. They couldn't develop in the city. So they came up with this idea of parking credits, where if you were developing on a parcel that was near a bus stop, they have a very small kind of bus system, but near a bus stop, near like a public parking facility, near on-street parking, if you installed bike racks, and a few other things, then you could reduce the amount of parking you needed to provide. And this is something that's probably applicable to a village or a city like Oneida, maybe not necessarily a town, but because they did this, developers are able to come in now and just provide certain features or locate in a place where they didn't have to provide as much parking, and they have to go through a timely, costly variance process in order to develop on that parcel. So that was one really good thing that came out of it, that the development community has really liked. And, the other thing is, I would really recommend going online and taking a look at the Unified Development Code on the City of Cheyenne's website, because it's one of the best written codes I've seen. It's plain language, easy to understand, and they did a really good job with kind of drawings just to illustrate the concepts. And so I think that's another important finding or takeaway from this case study. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Alan, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end.
Great. I think when I hear these stories, what I think of is it takes a lot of patience and time and effort to get these things accomplished. But Cheyenne dedicated themselves to it, and here we are talking about it in Oneida, New York, as a national case study. They've gotten all kinds of recognition for their work, and it's really paying off for them. So my takeaway is it's worth the effort to go and do it right and get your plans and codes up to snuff. So I'm going to just finish up with the back end of the presentation, and where we're going to talk about the goal areas and provide some examples of how some other communities have been addressing these. We have the 11 that I mentioned before. Strengthen the local and regional economies is one of them, where we've been emphasizing streamlining the development review process. Mike mentioned that. Supporting business and attraction and retention through policies. Support business development within the community, including local entrepreneurs, and encouraging local spending and tourism through buy local and other marketing campaigns, making sure that there are ways from a programmatic standpoint that money is being recycled through your community and not just leaving town the moment you spend it, that you're doing business with each other is a vital aspect of community economic health. As an example, in North Carolina, there are a number of areas that are working on either old textile or tobacco mills or furniture mills. A lot of those industries have basically left the state or have contracted significantly. So there are a lot of mill buildings around where the state provides tax credits and other incentives for these cities to use these buildings for different uses. Some of them have been turned into community-wide incubators for businesses that include nonprofit organizations. There are places that produce biofuels. There are artists who go in these things. There's even land around to support small-scale agriculture for some of these uses. A lot of these mills just disappear, and then the buildings get revitalized and reused because there are state and local incentives in place to make that happen. The second topic area is engage and connect community members. It's important to engage the public in the planning process. We heard that very clearly in Dryden, that the public was driving the process, deciding and helping to determine what they wanted their community to be. And only then, when the vision was established, could the community successfully go in and make the case for developing certain types of design standards and zoning. I think that's vital. I think also outside of the planning process, though, communities need to have ongoing interaction with each other. It doesn't have to be difficult or expensive. It can be a quarterly meeting or a special meeting of some purpose to talk about what issues in the community. But just by virtue of people getting together in the room and talking about the issues that the community is facing helps resolve some of the issues and helps build consensus for how to move forward and address those concerns. If you're not talking to each other, then you're not making progress as a community and moving a common vision forward. Some of the ways to get things done are to engage different types of people. These are a group of students that we had the opportunity to work with while working with EPA in Brownsville, Pennsylvania, where a group of students were endeavoring to build a stage and develop a park. These students were the champions of this project, and it was impossible for the local elected officials to say no to these kids. They were making this thing happen and raising money and doing the legwork and volunteering their time to make this happen. So they were a great example to us in the work that they were being able to put forth. Third topic is improve health and promote active living. This is a topic that includes different facets, including food and eating healthy, also access to recreational facilities, including active transportation and modes into daily life, and also access to healthcare services. I think with the amount of open space and public space in this area, that open space development is a key issue. We went by a place on the tour. You mentioned that there's a park that's a county park, but not many people know about it. You know, that's those kind of things, they should be advertised and people should know about them. They should know about the opportunities, and they should know what kind of amenities exist there. The Parks and Recreation Department of the county is producing a plan, and there's been a lot of effort with the Planning Department and Parks and Recreation to put together materials so that people are better educated, and those are now being surfaced. In this case, in Clifton Park, New York, they made a commitment to both acquiring open space, but also planning for trails and using various tools for land conservation. Those included direct purchase of properties, transfer of development rights, and also conservation easements. The purchase part was supported by a local general fund that was dedicated for this purpose. And they also took the time to put in their subdivision zoning different ways to achieve conservation subdivisions, but also open space preservation. They took a holistic approach to doing that. The fourth topic, protect natural habitats and ecosystems, deals with both site development issues, but also protecting natural resources and dealing with water quality and water conservation. There are different ways to go about this. This typical case is stream protection. In West Springfield, Massachusetts, they developed a plan for open space and recreation that included in it the preservation of natural systems and areas. They mandated a buffer zone be established. They established land use and corridor-specific wilderness protection characteristics in their development regs, and they designated this area as a wild and scenic river. They also had a lot of private ownership on this, and they got the help of some other organizations in dealing with private organizations and the private owners to go through the conservation process and to deal with options that they could employ here. The fifth is support productive agriculture for a variety of markets. There's a lot of agricultural products produced here. Increasingly, a lot of them are locally produced and consumed, and that's a very good trend to be taking place. And a lot of stuff is being marketed and used outside of the region as well. Mike mentioned that there's small but burgeoning yogurt industry that is a byproduct of the dairy industry that is becoming very successful. And it's important to value and preserve lands to the extent that those prime agricultural lands. Burlington County, New Jersey has different initiatives to acquire land. They have used transfer of development rights. They do outright purchase. They actually purchase farmland for the purpose of reselling it to farmers who come and want to do farming in the county, and they have a public fund for that purpose. They've preserved over 50,000 acres through these methods, but also through easements that they've acquired. They've adopted right to farm ordinances, which largely deal with nuisances, but also just promote farming and farming uses. And they also have other zoning and planning laws to protect lands. The sixth topic is meet housing needs for different ages and incomes. Low-income housing has been a topic that we've been concerned with in communities for a long time. How to deal with an increasingly large aging population is a hot topic of the day, and making sure that housing is visitable in terms of people being able to get in and out of homes if they are wheelchair bound or can't walk, and also being able to visit other people's homes and businesses so they have access to the full access to the community. There are many examples of great mixed-use projects that are new, that are medium density, that integrate living with central areas. This is an example from Longmont, Colorado, where they have 80 acres developed for 585 units, and it's a fully planned community. Numerous examples abound, but I would encourage you, if you haven't spent a lot of time learning about new urbanism or about mixed-use community development, there's a lot to be learned just by looking at them in terms of the way that new development and the quality of new development can be employed to create great places. There's some great new places being built. Some of them are appropriate for the rural context or this type of area in Madison County, and I just think they're a great way to learn about how things can really function. Number 7 is revitalize villages and town centers. We talked a lot about this today in the city of Oneida and how to do this. We talked about the zoning and planning. We talked about mixed-use development and encouraging housing and encouraging the use and revitalization of structures for housing and other purposes. Promoting street-level activity is vital for creating shops and street frontage that has active uses that's designed appropriately with windows and doors that front the street and that provide penetration into the building so that there's some interaction between what's going on in the street and what's happening in the buildings. Safety and comfort and walkability is key, and spending the transportation infrastructure in these areas is also important. Ranson and Charlestown, West Virginia. Ranson is actually a poster child of a community that has engaged the federal government and the different agencies of the federal government in numerous ways to get technical assistance, much like this, to get grants. They've gotten money from the USDOT. They've gotten planning funds from HUD. EPA has provided brownfields assistance and also assistance through their building blocks program. So they've been able to cobble together assistance from the federal government to put together some serious planning and initiatives that are happening there. Preserving historical and cultural resources is also a key component. There are a lot of them around here. It's not just the building stock, it's the history of the community. It's the uniqueness of the culture that needs to come out. And we spent a good deal of time in the group that I was in today talking about this and talking about not just thinking of it as a standalone element of how you plan your community, but integrating it into things like wayfinding plans so that people have better recognition of what's available and what the history of the community is. Both people who live here, who don't often know about the history of the community, but certainly for people who visit, who gain a greater appreciation and a deeper appreciation of the place if they understand history. A great example of this is Stanton, Virginia. They actually have set up organizations that are very active that deal with the stewardship of historic structures. They spent time educating the community about the value of historic structures, and then they went forth and developed a comprehensive strategy for improving facades, for preserving them. They have tax incentives. They set up an architectural review board to ensure that renovation and new projects were being sensitive to the context. They took the time to, and they put money into the transportation realm, the street, and did streetscaping and other types of investments. And they've participated in the Main Street program in Virginia, and they're on the National Register. So they've taken a comprehensive view, and you can see the quality of these buildings worth preserving for sure. Number 9 is provide transportation choices. We've discussed in ensuring that new development is walk and bike friendly. There's an effort to make sure that new developments have sidewalks associated with them among the folks we work with today, and that a lot of times those tend to get taken off the requirements, but those are important elements of new developments. Retrofitting programs are also key, both for accessibility but also just filling gaps. A lot of people in the community, they just really want to get from point A to point B, and they would love to just see a little piece of sidewalk be built to help them do that. And so even little investments can go a long way in terms of infrastructure. Here's an example from Lincoln City, Oregon. They implemented a traffic calming program. They put some medians in place. They widened their sidewalks. You can see the new concrete sidewalks there. They did some streetscaping, and they worked on the parallel street network. They got participation with the state of Oregon for funding, but they also did this through a design charrette process where they got together, rolled up their sleeves, talked about what they wanted to achieve. They had a diverse set of stakeholders involved to really plan this and visualize what they wanted to do before they set out to do it. And I think it's a great example of engagement that doesn't take a lot of effort, but it gets gets everyone on the same page and gets them excited about it and gets a lot of momentum behind the project. Number 10 is investing in efficient public infrastructure systems and operations, and this includes the water and sewer, the site development aspects of stormwater management, and the public infrastructure for stormwater management. This is an example of a green street where people are sequestering water before it goes into the stormwater management system and creating these great landscape areas. This one's from Portland, I believe. In Bellingham, Washington, they've done a multi-pronged approach of managing stormwater. They've created rain gardens. They've had 36 installations of these around, which are, rain gardens are just basically places that capture rain and hold them. The water percolates down or also can spill off if it overflows. But they're a way to keep that water out of your stormwater system and a way to actually filter and clean water before it goes into your system. And they've also done a number of other things, including pervious pavement and building drainage systems, on-site improvements that help with that whole approach. Increasing energy efficiency and providing renewable energy. We had the opportunity to visit one of the wind farms here in Madison County and learn a little bit about that during our visit. I think it's important to put those in the right place to make sure the community is involved in those kind of decisions. Also that there are other ways to deal with this at the building level. Building retrofits are an important part of energy efficiency of the community. That's usually the most bang for your buck is weatherization and updating your appliances and fixtures and systems in existing buildings, especially if there are not a lot of new buildings being built. That's the best strategy to approach that. Greensburg, Kansas is an example of a community that was devastated by a tornado. But interestingly, they decided that they were going to rebuild their community and make sure that it was I would say at this point, they're probably the best example that exists in rural America of a community that's embraced green building, energy efficiency, and sustainability. And it's just a great laboratory that's going on now, despite having the great tragedy that occurred there. And they actually have a wind farm. They're selling energy to other neighboring communities. They're producing enough energy to send energy elsewhere. So that's the overview of the tools and just a flavor of some things that people are doing in the country. In terms of this particular effort, we have a number of next steps. We are going to be refining the audit tool, getting some feedback here while we're visiting from our local stakeholders. We are going to prepare a report that really sets up the tool, talks about Madison County, and talks about smart growth in the rural context and documents the issues and opportunities that we've learned about here. And then the goal is to have county and local staff use this tool. In the future, we will go away and the tool will be left behind. And as individual communities start updating their regulations and plans, that these be employed in partnership and with the support of the Madison County staff. And also that you all just on an ongoing basis use this tool to identify places where those improvements can be made. So that concludes the presentation. I want to thank you, and we have just a few minutes for questions.
Just real quick, if anybody got closed out as far as your town, because you have extra copies, we can get by with one.
Okay, and I have one here. Okay.
I'm from the town of Lebanon, which is 2 towns to the south, the border of Schenectady County. I have 2 comments. One, their presentation wasn't rural enough. We don't have that where we live. We don't have a traffic light, a gas station, grocery store, a library. We do have at least 2 churches, which means we're pretty religious. Just kidding about that. Our community is agricultural based, and we are in the process of second year of a comprehensive plan. Last week we sent out a survey, and notice you didn't mention that in your presentation. That's all right. And we're gonna get that back, we're gonna analyze it, but really my question is this, and probably not so much to you, but rather to EPA. We have two documents that are really the fundamental of our town. One is called the Land Use and Local Management Law, and the other one is a subdivision law. And I was just wondering if EPA, people at EPA, would take a look at that and offer comment as to what should be changed or what we should enhance. Would you care to comment?
Well, theoretically, what you're describing is what this tool will do. So through this process, we'll be reforming the tool, and we'll be able to take those documents and sort of run them through the relevant sections, and maybe not tell you what needs to be changed, but maybe get a conversation started about different directions you can look in, or things that maybe you missed, or things that maybe could be more fine-tuned.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
So that's actually what this process is. So what we've also been doing is working with staff in the county so that they can actually help run through the tool with you once we go.
Tool.
And tool is basically, do we have a picture of it? So it's
like a worksheet.
It's sort of a matrix. So it's a series of topics and then subtopics and then questions that we go through with you, and then some sort of places to look for more information. If the answers to something is no, then this is where you can maybe look to figure out some other options. So that's what we call a tool.
Okay, so right now, there isn't a process where these two booklets could be reviewed.
Well, it's really, the tool is meant to be used by you. We're putting this together as a way to get a conversation started at the local level, and it's supposed to be very customizable to your circumstances. You mentioned that you're more rural than a lot of the places that were shown up there. So maybe you don't want to go through all those goal areas that Alan described. Maybe there's just a couple focusing on agriculture that are more relevant to you. So you could just take that chapter and look through the questions and use that as a way of evaluating what might need to be updated in your code documents.
I have an opinion. My opinion is this, that we have a comprehensive planning committee of 6 people, a planning board with 6 people. 3 people on the planning board are retired and 3 still working. They're volunteers. We're all volunteers. And yet, I look at you people, and it seems to me that you have jobs, you probably work 220 days a year, and you're dealing with this almost every day. We do not. And so when you tell me that this tool is for us, I understand that, but a lot of the interpretation, plus all the experience and education you have to look at these kinds of things on a town basis, to me, would be extremely relevant. That's my opinion.
Interject too, that's what we've kind of been doing today with Oneida, and we're gonna go to Chittenango tomorrow, and then also Brookfield, which Brookfield at this point doesn't have zoning or a comprehensive plan. Is anyone from Brookfield here tonight? Probably not, because we're gonna be there tomorrow.
But they're working on comprehensive plan.
Right, they are, right.
We
And so-
don't have zoning either.
Right, and so it's kind of being all an interesting point for them, because it's new for them, and so we're gonna, when we take this tool to them tomorrow, which is just in draft form, it's not only an opportunity to look at what is the tool missing on that side of things, but it's also an opportunity for Brookfield to have EPA and this consultant team and the county there to give some input. And this is just the start. This is just using the draft form of it, but it's very beginning. So.
Yeah, and I think Alan's last slide had touched on it, that the idea is that though it's not going to be EPA, it'll be us at the county that will be able to spend the time with you and do that. So,
Good.
yeah.
You're always welcome, Scott.
Just a little more work for you, Scott.
Right. No, but that's you did that. I mean, we asked for this.
Right, and that was why, that's why when Scott said in the beginning, we've done a lot of things at this point. Megan was actually out here in 2010 and talked about a lot of these concepts, and our feedback is always, well, all these things sound great, but how do we make them work for us? And so that's why the county, we applied for this grant, was to try to create more tools and resources that we can use specifically here. So hopefully, that's why we're here tonight, and we're going through that process now.
So I'm Sandra Eaton, I'm mayor in Mossbell, and we have some people that were putting together a comprehensive plan. We had our planning board chairman And a subcommittee that was working with them, they suddenly stopped because they had some roadblocks, got frustrated, couldn't find some answers to their questions. Whom can they contact then to get some answers?
Call us at
Contact
the
you.
county, yep.
Okay.
That's, I know suddenly if all municipalities in the county asked us for help at the same time, we might have a problem.
Your phone's already ringing off?
Yeah, no, that's what, we're there for. I mean, we get pulled in many different directions, but at the heart of
And your name again, Mike?
Scott,
Scott.
yep. I have a card here if you want it.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
Yeah, and someone in our office, so we have a staff of 4 people, and someone in our office is currently helping Brookfield, and I helped the town of Madison about a year ago when they did their comp plan. So we are there for GIS mapping. I mean, that's exactly what we do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Sorry.
I wanted to come back to this Burlington County, New York, to make sure I got this statement accurately. You said over 50,000 acres has been preserved since 1985 through, I guess, both the transfer and the purchase of development rights.
Yes.
And how was the money generated to make the purchase and transfers of these? Was that through taxes, raising taxes?
The purchase, yes, they have a countywide fund that is available for that. But that number also includes preservation through easements, which are not related to TDR. There are other ways to preserve through easements that are unrelated to the TDR program.
Okay, and the transfer of development rights is transferred from whom to whom?
What would happen is a rural property owner may have a vested right of developing a certain number of units on that piece of property. And in lieu of ever developing those units, another piece of property in a more urbanized area would get those units as a bonus of density on top of the density they're entitled to, and they pay for those rights. So it really, that system only works at a certain scale and in a certain type of region where there's enough urbanized development that wants those incentives and enough rural land that wants to get rid of their development incentives. That's sort of in a unique set of circumstances that I don't think exist here, but it certainly works in other places. There are other methods that are appropriate here, which are conservation subdivisions, getting easements for portions of park property, developing, in conjunction with wildlife corridors or greenways and other things that I think are very relevant. But transfer development rights is probably not one I would say is your first tool to get out of the toolbox.
I don't want to hog the Q&A, but I'm curious, one of the things that you talk about is public transportation, getting people from point A to point B, and obviously that's critical. Now, in a county of this size, the Route 5 corridor is the majority of the population, whereas I live in southern Madison County, which is 25 miles away. Gary said very rural. And one of the things about losing population rurally is that people don't have access to services. So if there's public transportation that can get them, let's say, up to Oneida to the doctor, this or that, obviously that means that you can retain the rural and you can redevelop the city. But Scott's been going through this with a budget that our public transportation is underfunded and can't get the funds. So I didn't know if you had addressed that or had any thought on that as far as, with any project, where does the money come from?
We
Big
have
questions.
talked about that during the visit. I don't have any fun answers for you.
No magic
How to
wand?
solve that, solve that problem. I mean, if you want the service, you got to pay for it. It's costly to operate that kind of service. And there's a lot of rural systems are going strictly to on-demand, and they're dissolving route structures to just serve on-demand, much like the service that provides the Medicaid service that is strictly focused on access to health care. Just the general transit services are doing some of that, and they're creating zones of the county that they will go pick you up on an on-demand basis rather than trying to attempt route structures. And there are some ways to create efficiencies by doing that. That's not that's doing more with the same amount of money. But in terms of getting new money for transit, I know that I wish I could say exactly what the new policy is. I can't remember the details of it, but the federal government has now allowed smaller systems to use a portion of their federal funds for operating, which is a big deal because it's the operating money that people can't come up with. So they've increased the cutoff for the size of systems that they can now use funds for other. They've done some things to help alleviate the problem of lack of operating funds. But it's a national issue, and it's where that money comes from is tough because not everyone benefits. In fact, oftentimes a very small percentage of the population benefits.
Right.
But I would say that but for those who absolutely need it, it's a critical need, and it's a public good that you pretty much have to put out there, in my opinion. So I know it's a tough problem, but
I know
those are my thoughts off the top of my head.
Also, a lot of communities are getting really creative when it comes to transportation now, even in Madison County. Is there anyone here from Cazenovia? They have a volunteer program that is pretty successful in Cazenovia, where volunteers are driving groups of people around. Also, Madison County Office for the Aging offers a similar service throughout the county to drive seniors to appointments. It's limited to seniors at this point, only to doctor's visits because of the number of drivers. That's an example where, we're filling the gaps just by thinking outside of the box, and in some cases, it might be responding better to the need than having the fixed route bus system that we've definitely put a lot of time, and we've changed it in the last couple of years, and I think it is successful in some ways, but there's some things that it just can't do being on a fixed route all the time. And so we have seen communities stepping up, and so maybe we just need to do a better job too of advertising those services to our communities that exist. There might even be more out there that I'm not aware of that we're doing. So.
My name is Gary Pereira. I'm with USDA Rural Development, and I think if I was going. I guess the first comment I want to make is as a private citizen, about 2 years ago, I was looking at buying a house in Oneida and Madison County. I worked between Syracuse and Marcy. So the first thing I started looking at was nice houses. You want to buy a nice house in a nice area, something that's been updated. But what I found as I was looking at houses in Madison County, the taxes were so high that I would end up paying more in taxes per month than I would for the house itself. The villages were the worst ones, I find. That no need to criticize Madison County. Same thing was going on in Oneida County. My uncle he lived in Whitesboro, and he's like, oh well, Whitesboro gets more services. I'm like, what do you get? Sewer, water? Well, no, I don't get that. But then what do you pay for? So one of the things I find is living in villages and a lot of these suburb areas is the taxes, especially in New York State. It's pretty bad. Where I end up buying a house in South Utica, which is a nice area, and I end up paying about half the amount of what I would have paid for a similar house in a village or a town area. I guess that's my citizen part right there. But back to my USDA hat on. I cover the eastern region of New York State, so up from the Canadian border down to Suffolk County, Long Island. And what I find from any town or village, it comes down to the people that actually put the effort into making their city or town or village better. I find that if they don't put the effort into it, by going out there and looking for government programs through the state, maybe it's Community Development Block Grant, the Main Street program through New York State, well, CBDG or whatever you want to call it, looking at funding through for small businesses through revolving loan funds, not focusing on one sector. Like for example, you'll have people who are, oh, we got to have high tech, and I don't care about tourism, I don't care about all that other stuff. We just want to focus on high tech businesses and jobs and ignore the rest. When they do that sort of things, it kind of alienates small businesses in some areas. Great examples of I find that on the eastern side of the state are Delaware County. They do a great job with their economic development. I find that City of Glens Falls has done a real good job. They also have other things like developers who want to rehab a lot of old manufacturing buildings. City of Glens Falls has a lot of great examples of that, where they go in, and they recently just did a mixed use, like I saw on the presentation over there. Commercial space on the first floor, and the next 2 floors were all loft apartments. So I find it's the people that want to actively go out there, not the, you can look at other areas in the state and it's somebody's brother who was hired and, they're the economic development guy and they don't want anything to do with actually working or doing their job, which gets to be aggravating, especially people in my job where it's like, we have these programs out there, but if you're not going to actively go out there and get them, then you're not really going to help people that you work for. So those are my 2 comments. The other comment is New York State does have a lot of programs out there, especially through NYSERDA, in terms of energy efficiency improvements. For example, for homeowners, you have the on-bill recovery loan program, which you don't have to be, some of the programs out there you have to be so poor, I don't even know how you can afford a house in some of them, but they have the on-bill recovery loan program where they do an energy audit to your house, and then you can actually apply for the improvements, so insulation, a new boiler, windows, anything that improves the energy, and you can actually pay for those improvements through the program, and you can go to NYSERDA's website and find out about that. They have lighting upgrade programs where they pay up to 70% for small businesses, and they also have an agriculture program where they're paying up to 75% for energy efficient improvements, which is, I think, a great program to have. You're all paying for it anyways, so you might as well utilize it, because if you ever look at your energy bill through National Grid, you'll see the small business development, SBDC charge. That's basically where this funding comes from. So those are the pointers I have to make to figure out. I would say those.
Thank you. Anyone else? We're officially out of time, but I think we can discuss a little more if you have a burning interest.
Okay. Well, to conclude, thanks to the city of Oneida for giving us the space. We've been in this room all day, like I said before, so we appreciate that. As far as follow-up, if you don't know how to contact us, come up, I'll give you a card. We definitely plan to be working on this for the foreseeable future, so I think we've got another 8 months or so in our project here to get things wrapped up and finalized, and then we can start hitting the ground and working with you all individually. So thank you very much for being here. Have a good night.